A racist cop got into a fight and slapped a black woman because of his racial bias. But then he finds out that she is the United States National Security Advisor when her Secret Service agents arrive. By the end of this story, he wished he had not laid his hands on her. But by then it was too late. To better understand this story, we need to go back to the very beginning. If you believe in what's right, in treating people fairly no matter the color of their skin, hit that subscribe button and join the movement. Only those who do not care for justice will refuse to subscribe. Now let us begin. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the nearly empty gas station. A dusty wind carried the scent of gasoline and asphalt as Tasha Williams stepped out of her sleek black SUV. Her navy pantsuit was crisp, her posture upright, exuding confidence. She wasn't in a hurry, just stopping for a bottle of water before continuing her drive. Across the lot, Officer Bradley sat in his cruiser, eyes locked on her. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, his gaze sharp and scrutinizing. Out-of-town plates. A black woman in a high-end vehicle. His gut twisted with the kind of suspicion he didn't bother questioning. Tasha barely spared the patrol car a glance as she entered the store. Inside, the clerk, a bored teenager, barely looked up. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, paid in cash, and stepped back out into the thick, humid air. Bradley's grip tightened on his coffee cup. The moment she unlocked her car, he flicked on his lights. The red and blue light flashed. Tasha turned, brows furrowed. The engine of the police cruiser roared as it rolled forward, blocking her exit. A slow breath escaped her lips as she set the water bottle on her car's roof. She had been here before, not in this town, but in moments like this. Bradley pushed his door open, stepping out with his hand resting near his belt. Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Tasha didn't move at first. Her expression didn't change. But in that instant, she knew. This wasn't just a routine stop. The sharp wail of sirens shattered the quiet hum of the gas station. Red and blue lights flashed, bouncing off the black paint of Tasha's SUV. Her fingers tightened around her car keys as she turned toward the police cruiser, now blocking her exit. A moment ago, she had been thinking about the rest of her drive. Now she was calculating every movement. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker again. Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Tasha inhaled slowly, her face unreadable. She raised her hands slightly, stepping away from the door. Is there a problem, officer? Her voice was steady, but her pulse picked up. Officer Bradley emerged from the cruiser, moving fast. His boots hit the pavement with too much force, shoulders squared as if he were heading into a fight. His eyes flicked over her car, shiny, expensive DC plates. His lips curled slightly, as if confirming some private assumption. You seem to be in a hurry? He asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Tasha met his gaze without flinching. Just passing through. Bradley stopped a foot away, his hand resting near his belt. He leaned in slightly, scanning her, sizing her up. Is this your car? Her jaw tensed. Yes, it is. He smirked, nodding like he had already made up his mind. License and registration. Now. Tasha's fingers twitched at her side. She moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into her purse. Bradley didn't step back. He didn't ease up. Instead, his hand inched closer to his holster. When she handed the license and registration documents to him, he snatched them from Tasha's hand, barely glancing at them before flicking his eyes back to her. What's a DC politician doing in my town? His tone was laced with something just shy of contempt. Tasha didn't react. Her posture remained steady, her face unreadable. I don't see how that's relevant. I'm just passing through. Bradley let out a slow, deliberate chuckle, shaking his head as he looked her over again, like she was something out of place, something that didn't belong. His fingers toyed with the edge of her license, tapping it against his palm. The silence stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. The gas station was quiet, save for the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Tasha held his gaze unshaken. Bradley exhaled sharply through his nose. Stay right there. He turned and stalked back toward his cruiser, holding onto her documents like a trophy. Then he came back after a few minutes and started walking a slow, deliberate circle around Tasha's SUV, his eyes scanning every inch as if expecting to find something incriminating. His fingers brushed against the tinted glass, smudging it with a streak of sweat and dust. You don't look like you belong here. His voice was flat, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. Tasha's jaw tightened, but she refused to let her composure slip. Officer, I expect professionalism. Before she could finish, Bradley lunged forward, gripping her arm. "Step away from the vehicle," he ordered, yanking her back. The force of it sent a sharp jolt up her shoulder. A gasp caught in her throat, but she refused to stumble. Her heart pounded as she steadied herself, eyes locking onto his with quiet fury. "Let go of me." Her voice was firm, unwavering. But Bradley didn't release her. Instead, he tightened his grip, his fingers digging into the fabric of her blazer. The gas station was still, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Tasha clenched her fists, pulse thrumming in her ears. And she knew one thing for certain. This would not end the way Bradley thought it would. Tasha jerked back slightly, trying to pull free, but Bradley's grip was ironclad. And then, Bradley slapped her. Her head snapped to the side as the slap landed across her cheek. The sting bloomed instantly, heat rushing beneath her skin. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The sound of the slap still echoed in the air. Tasha didn't move. She didn't flinch. She slowly turned her head back to him, her dark eyes locking onto his. Bradley smirked. His chest rose with a satisfied breath, as if he had proved something. "Yeah, that's what I thought." His voice was low, cocky. "Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." Tasha didn't move. She didn't obey. She could still feel the burn on her cheek, but that wasn't what held her still. It was the realization. He expected her to break, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. Bradley's hand was hovering near his belt, ready to snap the cuffs around Tasha's wrists. His grip was still tight on her arm, and his eyes were dark with irritation. He was seconds away from completing the arrest when a sound, a loud screeching of tires, cut through the tense silence. Before he could process what was happening, 3 black SUVs roared to a halt right in front of them, tires skidding against the pavement. The doors of all 3 vehicles slammed open almost simultaneously, and within seconds, Secret Service agents swarmed the area. Bradley's heart skipped a beat. His hand instinctively retreated from Tasha's arm, his body freezing in place. Agent Penn, tall and imposing, stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he scanned the scene. His voice rang out with a commanding authority that couldn't be ignored. "Step away from her. Hands where we can see them." Bradley's breath caught in his throat. The world around him seemed to spin as he turned, searching for an explanation, for a way out of what was suddenly happening. But the agents were already in position, their hands resting on their weapons, their stances resolute. The color drained from Bradley's face as he realized just how out of his depth he was. He wasn't in control anymore. Tasha stood still, her posture unwavering, eyes never leaving Bradley. The sting from the slap still burned, but now she knew she didn't have to fight alone. Bradley's mind raced, his previous arrogance crumbling into something far more primal. The smirk he had worn only moments ago was gone, replaced with something far less certain, fear. The world around him seemed to collapse as he watched the agents draw closer. Agent Penn's voice was cold and measured as he spoke again. "You just assaulted the United States National Security Advisor." Bradley's chest tightened. His hands went clammy, and he stumbled slightly, his eyes darting around, desperately searching for an excuse. She was resisting. He stammered, his words faltering in the face of the undeniable truth that loomed before him. Agent Penn's eyes narrowed even further, as if this explanation was not only inadequate but insulting. His gaze shifted from Bradley to Tasha, who remained composed, a silent strength in the midst of this storm. Tasha's voice broke the tension, calm and unwavering, like a smooth stone in a turbulent river. "I asked for professionalism," she said, her voice cutting through the air with authority. "Instead, you showed me who you really are." Bradley's expression faltered at her words, the weight of them hitting him harder than anything that had come before. For a moment, he felt like a small child being caught in a lie, too late to backtrack, too far gone to make it right. The realization washed over him like a cold wave. He had crossed a line, and it would cost him. "I put hours into researching and telling these stories for your viewing and educational pleasure. Just tap that little red button. It takes half a second, but means the world to me." The moment hung in the air, thick with the tension of unspoken consequences. Without a word, Agent Penn took a step forward, his movements deliberate, his hands reaching for Bradley's arms. Bradley barely had time to react before the agent grabbed hold, twisting his arms behind his back in a swift, practiced motion. "Officer Bradley, you are now under federal investigation for excessive force and civil rights violations." Agent Penn's voice was cold and final. Bradley's breath hitched. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He felt the cold bite of metal as handcuffs were snapped around his wrists, the harsh realization sinking in. The bystanders, who had been watching in silence, began to murmur among themselves. Phones were pulled out, cameras turning to record the scene. The sound of clicks and swipes filled the air as the crowd began to gather around, eager to document this shocking turn of events. Bradley tried to wriggle free, but the agents were unyielding. His mind raced with frantic thoughts, but the more he struggled, the tighter their grip became. The reality of his situation was undeniable. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Tasha, her posture still poised, stepped back slightly, her gaze never leaving the scene unfolding before her. Agent Penn was unrelenting. As Bradley stood frozen, his arrogance slowly slipping away, the agent closed the distance between them. His hands reached for Bradley's arms with military precision, twisting them behind his back. Bradley's attempt to resist was futile. The handcuffs clinked against his wrists, sharp and final. "Officer Bradley, you are now under federal investigation for excessive force and civil rights violations." Agent Penn's voice rang out, firm and commanding, his grip tightening as he moved Bradley away from Tasha. The surrounding crowd erupted into murmurs, phones raised, eager to capture every moment of this shocking spectacle. Bradley, once so sure of himself, was now a prisoner of his own making. His eyes darted around, his mind racing, but his body was held firmly in place by the agents. For a brief, fleeting moment, Bradley's eyes met Tasha's. He expected to see anger, fear, or triumph. Instead, he saw nothing but calm resolve. She didn't need to gloat. This moment, his downfall, was punishment enough. The chaos of the moment slowly began to settle. Tasha stood still, her face composed, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips as she adjusted her blazer, smoothing out the wrinkles that had appeared during the confrontation. She turned to Agent Penn, her eyes meeting him with a silent understanding. His presence was steady, his movements sharp and professional. "Appreciate the timing," Tasha said, her voice steady, but there was a glimmer of gratitude in her words. Agent Penn nodded, his tone respectful. "We always have your back, ma'am." Tasha gave a small nod in return, her confidence unshaken. She had expected nothing less. The timing had been perfect, and the agent's response swift. This wasn't just a victory for her, it was a reminder of the power of unity and standing up for what was right. As Bradley was led away, his head hung low, Tasha felt a quiet satisfaction, but she didn't let it overtake her. This wasn't about her, this was about the message. Tasha watched Bradley's retreating figure, his arrogance now replaced with shame. But her gaze didn't linger long. She turned back toward her SUV, the soft click of her heels on the pavement punctuating the silence around her. As the Secret Service agents escorted Tasha back to her SUV, Tasha's mind was already focusing on what lay ahead, the work yet to be done. But then, a young voice cut through the noise. "Ma'am, I saw everything. You handled that so well. You're my hero." Tasha turned, surprised, to find a young black girl standing before her. The girl's eyes were wide with admiration, her words filled with sincerity. She couldn't have been more than 15, but the look on her face was one of respect and awe. Tasha's heart warmed. She bent down slightly, meeting the girl's gaze, and offered a genuine smile. It wasn't a smile of pride, it was a smile of understanding. She had done something small but important. Something that resonated far beyond the confrontation at the gas station. "Thank you," Tasha said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But this isn't about me. It's about all of us." The girl beamed, her eyes shining with a new sense of possibility. Tasha straightened up, her expression turning serious as she moved toward her SUV. "If you believe in justice, equality, and the fight against police brutality, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can amplify these stories and demand change. Hit that subscribe button now, because not hitting it would mean you want to be silent. I will see you in my next story." The end.